now listening to the Going North podcast. I'm your host, millennial author, professional speaker, and book enthusiast, Dom Brightmon. Every Monday and Thursday, you will hear the voice of an author share their stories, how they had to overcome some trials in life, how they published their books, and not only that, they will leave you with some pearls of wisdom to create a dynamic life. Now let's get on with the show.
And today on the Going North podcast, we have, you guessed it, another author, but not just any author. This author right here is one heck of a guest because he is all about helping some entrepreneurs and top performers reach their greatness. This wonderful guy right here, he was formerly a vice president of global operations for Exacom Corporation, and he has led and established a startup business units in North and South America, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. And also he serves as the chief catalyst for the Conductor. And also he teaches in the College of Business at the University of Central Arkansas. Not only that, he's received a number of awards and special recognition, including being named in 2004 by the Arkansas Business Magazine as one of the top 40 business leaders under 40. One of the top 40. Not the top 100, but the top 40. And this wonderful gentleman right here has been invited as a speaker, trainer, and consultant for numerous companies, institutions, and organizations across 5 continents. And he's also a family man because he has a wonderful wife by the name of Lori who make their home in Conway, Arkansas. And you're probably wondering who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the one and only Dr. Jeff Standridge. How are you today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great, Dom. How about you?
Oh, doing fabulous indeed, especially on a Friday.
Man, I'm telling you, it's hard to be upset when the checks are coming in, and it's hard to be upset at the end of the day on a Friday.
That's right, unless you're one of those who love to work on the weekends. Sometimes not by choice.
You know, I love to work, but I also love to relax.
Woo! I can agree with that. It's probably going to need to learn that skill as a top performer, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Oh, amen to that. So with reading over your magical biography, you have a very unique background with all sorts of experience. So mind telling us a bit about yourself and maybe fill in some gaps, some things I may have missed?
Sure. I grew up in a real small town, graduated high school with 28 people, went off to college, crammed a 4-year degree into 5.5 years. Little joke for you there to get you started. No, I did. I crammed a 4-year degree into 5.5 years and then ended up moving into healthcare. I worked my way through college as an emergency medical technician, became a respiratory therapist and a paramedic, helicopter team at Arkansas Children's Hospital, and then moved into a faculty position at the University of Arkansas for medical sciences. And spent about 6 years doing the faculty thing and probably about 12 years total of being in healthcare before I took a left turn, went straight into business where I spent the next 20 years working for Axiom Corporation, running global operations. And then about 2 years ago, if you could see me, you could see I have air quotes in the air. I retired from Axiom Corporation and started working with the Conductor, driving innovation, entrepreneurship, talent development, and economic empowerment across the good state of Arkansas and beyond. And so that's where I spend most of my time today.
Wow. That's awesome. Lots of experience right there. And looks like it says there in your media kit, looks like you went from being a member of a helicopter team at a children's hospital to being a professor at a medical school and to being an entrepreneur, investor, and author. So how in the world did all that happen?
Well, it seems like a revolution or multiple revolutions or revolutionary changes in careers, but more it was evolutionary. So it just kind of evolved that way. It's not anything that I really set out to do. While I was serving as a respiratory therapist on the helicopter team at a children's hospital, and then becoming a professor and working in healthcare. I think I was early in my career looking at what I really felt like I was called to be, called to do. I was good at those things, but I'm not certain that they were necessarily my calling. And then I was, as part of my academic background, I was studying top performance, literally academically researching what is it that differentiates the folks who are in the top 1% of performers from the folks who are, say, in the middle 50%. Middle 50% of performers are the vast majority of the American workforce. They'll never lose their jobs for low performance, yet they also won't ever perform as well as the top 1%. And so what is it that differentiates those? I began to observe it wasn't academic credentials. Didn't matter what kind of degrees they had or what kind of letters they had after their name. Didn't matter what they made on their ACT or the SAT scores. Didn't matter what they made on their grade point average. Some of my best performers were folks who barely made it out of college with a C average, and they were some of the top performers. So I started studying what that was, really focused in the healthcare industry because I was a professor at a medical university. And then a publicly traded marketing and information technology company called Axiom Corporation reached out to me in early 1998, and they wanted to conduct some of that same kind of research inside their workforce. They wanted to look at what is it that was differentiating top performers inside Axiom Corporation. So began consulting with them in February of 1998, consulted with them for most of that spring semester, and then at the end of the semester in May, they made me an offer to move into working with them full-time, which I did, completely re-engineered the way employees were selected, developed, coached, and ultimately evaluated and compensated based upon a model of high performance. And from there, I guess, as they say, the rest is history. I spent 20 years with the company and worked on 5 continents, buying and acquiring and managing companies, both small and larger companies. Did a new startup in Poland, a new startup in China, worked in the Middle East, worked in South America. And so, as I said, each of those steps seem, if you're looking at them from the outside looking in, they really seem like revolutionary career moves. But from my perspective, they were really more evolutionary.
I love it. Always evolve, and you evolved so much that you went all the way from Poland to South America in terms of the companies. That's amazing.
Yeah, and as I've taught many times, you've had guests that have said the same thing, that you're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. Everything's always changing, and you're either able to evolve yourself and reinvent yourself, or you end up moving backwards. And I guess I've perfected, if you will, a knack for being able to re-engineer myself.
Beautiful indeed, beautiful indeed. So with all those countries, how is it like to work internationally?
I will tell you that was one of the highlights of my career. So as I said, I came from rural Arkansas, graduated high school with 28 people, had never been on an airplane, a commercial airplane, until I graduated high school, and that was to go off to basic training. And then I'm not certain that I flew more than a handful of times after that until I joined Axiom, probably no more than a handful of times. And so to spend, effectively 10 years traveling no less than every month, usually about every 3 weeks, to Poland, China, the Middle East, Brazil, all across Europe. Had the opportunity to live in Europe for about 18 months, working over there as well. I have to say it was at least one of the highlights of my career.
Oh, I can imagine that indeed. And thanks for your service, by the way. I always want to thank everyone, especially guests that come on the show that were veterans in the Army.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. So any advice for those looking to one day do business overseas?
Yeah. First of all, no matter what country you're in, no matter what their customs, no matter what their religious beliefs or what have you, we're all people. And, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And taking a little bit of an effort to learn some of the cultural nuances, some of the language nuances of those countries, makes a huge difference in being able to demonstrate that you, in fact, are open to experiencing new things and what have you. You know, I used to always, every time I would begin to go to a new country, would make a point to learn a few phrases that I knew I was going to need to say. And what I experienced was in virtually every country, if I could learn how to say good day, hello, please, thank you, some of those kinds of phrases, and even if I butchered them, but could say them in a way that were at least intelligible, they could understand exactly what I was saying, even though I may not have said them absolutely correctly with the right emphases or what have you. Just the fact that I would try to speak to them in their language made a huge difference in their acceptance of me. So I would always encourage, if you're ever going to go to a new country, learn how to say some of those basic everyday phrases and use them while you're there.
Yeah, that's very true indeed. And I'm pretty sure not only the nuances in the culture, that probably may have influenced a lot of the decision-making, too, with the different styles and cultures behind each business, probably.
Sure, absolutely. You know, like I said, people do business with folks they know, like, and trust, and there's a likability factor in someone who tries to meet you where you are, who comes to your community and chooses to eat like the locals eat, chooses to stay among the locals, and chooses to try to communicate with the locals in a way that they normally communicate. That there's a likability factor, and there's a trust factor that gets built there.
Very true indeed. So now that you're all the way out in Arkansas and now back in the United States, how does it feel being back? Any plans to go back overseas and do more business?
You know, I am always open to doing business wherever a good opportunity exists. You know, I still have lots of colleagues in Europe, lots of colleagues in Asia and Middle East and South America, and stay in contact with them on a regular basis. And who knows, opportunity may crop up, and I wouldn't hesitate to hop over there and engage with my friends or friends of my friends in that regard. True
indeed. And I guess that might happen with your consulting practice, right?
Yeah, so I spend quite a bit of time engaged in a variety of consulting activities, whether it's generally most of them are focused on innovation. You know, the world around us is growing and changing at such a rapid rate that I've come to recognize that leadership and innovation are really inseparable. If you're going to be a good innovator, then you have to influence people to actually adopt those innovations, and that requires leadership. And if you're going to be a good leader, you have to recognize that the world is constantly changing, and you're going to have to always be a little bit disruptive and be willing to innovate in order to carry out those leadership actions. So it's those things are directly related and even codependent or interdependent, if you will, upon one another. So I spend a lot of time from a consulting perspective working with individuals. So I do some executive coaching with individuals who help them bring together those things of innovation and leadership. And then I work with teams and organizations as well across multiple industries. And I have no doubt that over the course of the short term rather than the long term, that those activities will carry me far and wide like they have previously.
Awesome indeed. I did like what you mentioned earlier about leadership being able to deal with chaos, and it kind of reminds me of a quote from, I forgot which book it was, but I think one of my mentors said, is that leaders distill chaos.
Yeah, you know, that's right. Good leaders, I would probably preface it with that. Good leaders distill chaos. You know, I've always said that my role as a leader is to remove distractions from the folk that I'm charged with leading, is to help them see clearly through the fog and the mist and the confusion of chaos, and to chart a course and point the way, and then be behind them, helping guide them through that chaos, that confusion, that fog of war, if you will. There aren't a lot of leaders out there, in my experience, who really embrace that aspect of leadership. The ones who do, as I said a few moments ago in talking about the top 1% of performers, if you were to look at the top 1% of leadership performers, you would definitely see that they are distilling chaos, they are removing confusion, and they are charting a path to the ultimate destination. Great leaders, top 1% of leaders, they have a future orientation. They know where they're going. They may not always know how to get there, but they know where they're going. And in the fog of war or during the mist of chaos, they're able to at least continue on in the direction that they're headed, knowing that around each corner might be a new obstacle that they have to figure out how to distill and dispel, if you will. But good leaders do that.
Very true indeed. And speaking of distilling chaos in the fog of war, there may be some authors out there who may be looking to get to bestseller status, and you, sir, have not one but 2 bestsellers within 5 months of another, which is amazing. So what do you think is the driving force and the driving demand behind your 2 wonderful books?
I like to teach something that I call, and it's not something that I thought of, and I would love to have thought of it, but in the innovation space and in the startup space, if you will, there's a concept called customer development and customer discovery and customer validation. That both of those things together are sometimes referred to as customer development. And what that was born from was a statistic that says that 36 to 42, depending on what numbers you look at, 36 to 42% of all new startup companies fail because they create a product or a service that no one wants. And that may sound very, very simple, but think about the number of people who have gotten patents, created products. You've seen it on Shark Tank probably innumerable times if you've ever watched that show, where they've been working at something for 3 years and they have, $10,000 worth of sales. And the sharks look at them and say, look, it's not working. They either created a product that no one really were willing to buy or willing to buy at the price that they had to sell it in order to make money, or they just failed in their execution. And so the concept of customer development, customer discovery, customer validation, customer development is to get out and talk to people, get out of the office, get out of the building, and actually talk to people whom you believe will be prime users of whatever problem you're trying to solve. And so that's something that I sought to do. And I know that most books are never really completely read from cover to cover. First of all, I know that the average book sells about 2,000 or 3,000 copies, that the average book is purchased for a female. Even if the theme of the book is for a male, it tends to be purchased by a female, and that the vast majority of books are never read from cover to cover. And so I set out talking to folks in the target market of the folks that I wanted to get in front of, and finding out what they looked for in a book, what they liked in a book, what they didn't like in a book, what kind of challenges they were having. And so I set about choosing a format that's in very small, bite-sized snippets, if you will, or vignettes. And the way both of my books, the Innovators Field Guide and the Top Performers Field Guide, are laid out, each book has 52 chapters. And so each of those chapters are compiled such that there's a kind of a teaser title. It doesn't really tell you what the chapter's about, but it might give you a few clues, or it might pique your interest, if you will. Followed behind the teaser title, there's an actual quote, usually by some famous person, and the quote kind of unpacks the topic of that particular chapter. And then there's a 350 to 500 word reading that can be read in 3 to 5, 10 minutes maximum, depending on how fast you read. And then beyond that, all of the chapters have 3 to 4 questions, key actions, questions for consideration, key actions that you can take in order to actually act upon the information that you just read. And so that combination of a title, a quote, a 350 to 500 word reading followed by some key actions, that gets replicated 52 times in 52 different chapters in the book. And so one could take one of those chapters and read 1 a week for a year and work through the book slowly like that, or 2 a week for 6 months, 3 a week for 4 months, or 4 a week for 3 months, depending on how rapidly they wanted to move through the book. And that seems so far to be a recipe for success. The reviews have been great. The books, while they were released within 5 months, they actually hit The Innovators Field Guide was released in December of 2017, and it hit bestseller status. The Top Performers Field Guide was released in May of 2018, and not only did it hit bestseller status, but it kind of catapulted the Innovators Field Guide back to bestseller again, so they were on the list at the same time, which was kind of unique. So I'm very fortunate, but I think much of what's driving demand is the fact that I tried to write what people wanted.
That's beautiful, and it's kind of interesting that you mentioned customer development. I heard of service and acquisition, but never development. That's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that we talk about a lot in the entrepreneurship space and in the innovation space. Is what I have found is that there's a difference between a problem and a nuisance, a business problem and a nuisance. And what I mean by that, I'll give you an example. I had an entrepreneur who came to me, and I spend the vast majority of my time doing one-on-one coaching, consulting, and mentoring with entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs. It may be people who have their own business. It may be people who have an idea for a business or an idea for a product, or they may actually have an ongoing business of several $1 million, even all the way up to executives of large multinational corporations. And I had a young entrepreneur come to me and say, I've got this idea for an app. And that's generally what happens, is they have an idea and they go into a back room and they bang out the code to code that idea or to create that app or to engineer that product or what have you. They don't talk to anyone. And then they they mortgage their house or they spend 5 or 6 figures building out this product, and then they can't figure out why no one actually will buy it. And that's where the 36 to 42% of entrepreneurs build a product that no one wants, and so they fail as a result. So we like to teach hey, look, when you have an idea, step away from your idea and really focus on trying to identify the problems that your idea solves. What are the business problems you're trying to solve, and who are the major target customers or target industry segments that experience that experience that business problem, and then go talk to them and ask them some open-ended, unbiased questions in order to either validate or invalidate that you actually have a problem and that they experience the problem as you see the problem. And what you'll find many times is they will invalidate what you thought was the business problem, and they'll point to something that is even a much greater problem. And once you validate that you have a problem that's worth solving, then you go and try to create a solution versus just coming up with an idea and trying to back into the business problem or the target customers that might like that idea. And so we call that process, it involves a few more things, but we call that customer development.
Beautiful indeed. It's best to try to get an idea of what your client and your customer needs as opposed to just putting something out there and and seeing who actually pays attention and then who actually buys it afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, wouldn't it be great if you could spend very, very little money on the front end and every single time build precisely something that someone wants and would be willing to pay for? And so that gets into what's called Agile software development. There's another process there called Agile, which the hallmark of that is, 75 or 80% is the new perfect. Spend as little money as you can building a minimally viable product for which people would see the value and would be willing to pay some money for it. Get it out there in the market, then start asking your customers how well they like it, and use future revenue to build additional features and functions to that minimally viable product, and build out your product with real live customer guidance.
Very true indeed, very true indeed. And it's actually a necessity in today's society because the world is always growing and changing. You got to be agile. You got to be able to change with the times and actually know what people want. So that is really great.
That's right. Agreed.
Well, all righty. In addition to your wonderful books, I'm pretty sure you've researched and read probably thousands of books. Mind sharing your top 2 or top 3 that have really just inspired you and to really help catapult you to now being a best-selling author?
Well, I think one that I spend a lot of time reading and working in right now is one called Running Lean by Ash Maurya. Running Lean by Ash Maurya, Maurya. He really describes this concept of customer development Another author that works with him, and they're very similar in some of their views on customer development, customer discovery, is a gentleman by the name of Steve Blank, and he wrote a book called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. Both of those are very, very good books when thinking about innovation, entrepreneurship, and this concept of customer development and building things that customers want to buy. Then there are, a number of leadership books out there that I think have had an impact on me. When I was doing my research into top performance years ago, I came across the concepts of emotional intelligence, and Daniel Goleman, Goleman, Daniel Goleman has several books out there. A book titled Emotional Intelligence, Working with Emotional Intelligence, Primal Leadership, and what have you. So those are some of the ones that probably have had a significant influence on me throughout the years.
Great stuff indeed, especially emotional intelligence. That one's a continuous classic right there.
That's right. And it's hard to not also, when you're talking about classics, talk about Stephen Covey. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Principle-Centered Leadership, the book that his son, Stephen M.R. Covey, wrote called The Speed of Trust. All of those books are very, very good. There's another one out there right now. It's a book called Seeing the Big Picture, and it's really about the financial engine of a company. What is it that drives the financial engine of a company, and really having business acumen. Kevin Cope, C-O-P-E, Kevin Cope is the author of Seeing the Big Picture. Business acumen to build your credibility, your career, and your company. So being able to understand, if you're not a financial person but you are in business, you need to have a basic command of financials, and Kevin Cope does a really good job of laying that out.
Solid advice. And speaking of advice, if you were to go back in time and you were 25 again, but this time in the current year of 2018, what advice would you give to yourself?
So I would say, if I were 25 again, the advice that I would give myself would be recognize more quickly than you did in your career that success requires a very delicate balance. And it requires a very delicate balance between two things, results and relationships. Now, I'm kind of a results-oriented person, and what I have found is that results-oriented people, if they focus on results at the expense of relationships, they will be wildly successful very, very quickly until they alienate everyone around them who's responsible for helping them maintain those results. And then there are those who are much more relationship-oriented, and they focus on relationships perhaps at the expense of results. And people love them. They love to hang around them. They love to be around them. They love to spend time with them until they lose respect for them because they can't deliver results, or they can't do what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it. And then they end up losing them both. The end result of having an imbalance in either direction, toward results or toward relationships, the end result of either imbalance is the same. You lose both. You lose the relationships and you lose the results. So I learned that the hallmark of high performance through my own academic research and through my applied research of actually watching and observing high performers was that there is this delicate balance of results and relationships that's constantly maintained. Now, don't get me wrong, we all have a tendency toward one side of that equation or the other. I have a tendency toward the results aspect, and there are days when I find myself overbalanced or imbalanced toward results, but I have to recognize that and move myself back toward the middle of the tightrope, so to speak.
So a different type of R&R.
That's right. That's right.
Solid advice indeed. Results and relationships. Love it.
Yeah, and that's really what you find as the hallmark of my book, the Top Performers Field Guide. Actually, there's a chapter in there at the back that's an excerpt from another book I'm working on where I really dig into this whole results relationships aspect even further.
Woohoo! Looking forward to that one. Looks like someone's going to have a trifecta soon.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Fingers crossed.
Well, all righty. For those who want to keep in touch with you and be on the lookout for book number 3, how can folks reach out and connect with you?
The best way is to go to jeffstandridge.com. That's my name, jeffstandridge.com. They can find me there. And I'm also on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/Jeff Standridge, and would love to connect with folks.
Well, all righty, folks, there you have it. Go on ahead and pick up some copies of both of his wonderful best-selling books and be on the lookout for that third book. My personal favorite is The Top Performance Field Guide, because I personally find myself as a top performer, and I don't stay on the top of my game by being stagnant. And his book is one that I'm going to add to my repertoire of staying on the top of my game, and you should too. So go on ahead and find him, be on the lookout for his third book, because it'll be just as good, probably, if not better than the other two.
Well, thanks so much, Dom. It's been a pleasure visiting with you today. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks a bunch for your listening ears on the Going North podcast. I hope you really, really enjoyed that episode. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to share it with your friends and family, especially those who love podcasts and love listening to some inspiration and motivation.